Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Arthur. So just a very quick introduction to myself. Very briefly, I'm Lynn Mathew. I worked for Unilever for 20 years, first as a chemist and then the bulk of it in their consumer science department, which they had their own quite large research department. That's where I learnt my trade in using video for research since the late 1980s. We used to go off to different countries with camera in hand and video different, mainly women, using the types of products that Unilever develop. Very much for research and development side of things rather than for marketing, but also used for both. I left in 2003 and rather fell into video production by accident, as many people do, but came back into the research fold again when my old company contacted me to edit some material. So I've had experience from the client end, direct in research, and also video company experience. So let's make a start. Let's first look at the players involved. We have the client. That could be you, the researcher, giving a presentation to the client. We also have the video company doing the research. Now, it might actually be you doing the videoing, but it might be a video company doing the actual videoing. And then we have the researcher themselves doing the bit in the middle, tearing your hair out. And by the way, we also have the client has brought the time frame forward by a good 2 weeks and said, can we actually complete the project early while you're still tearing your hair out? So we have the researcher there orchestrating the lot to a budget and to a timescale. Now, what I'm going to do is, my talk is split into two. The first part of my talk, I'm going to look at the researcher-client interaction, because that's the key thing that sets everything up before the researcher even gets to the videographer. So the first part of the presentation will be the link with the client and the things that the researcher has to think about. Andy will then come in from Vox Pops, and then my final part will be the link between the researcher and the videographer. So the first part is probably a bit more strategic. The last part is quite nitty-gritty. So let's think about why the client might use video. This statement is by Roger Curville, and he's not making it in relation to research. He's actually making it in relation to using video in webinars, but the statement is extremely apt. What are you going to do with video that you can't otherwise do without it? And that's always the question to be asking the client. Why do you want to use video? What can you actually achieve with video that you can't without? So, key question. And the client might want to use video to get below the surface of what people say, what they say they do, and why they do what they do. But this is a really broad brush statement. It doesn't help you plan the project in detail. So the rest of this section is about helping you, the researcher, do just that by finding out what the client really needs. And I'm going to show 4 examples of types of project. These are by no means describe all the different types of project you can use video for, but it's just a starting point with 4 different examples. The first example is where people are using very regular repetitive behavior. They don't necessarily think about what they're doing. If you were to ask them what they do in detail, they would give you an answer, and they might give you a good answer, but it might be a rationalized answer because you don't always know all the details of what you do. So one type of research might be where it's pure observation. You're not asking any questions, you're not disrupting the process in any way by talking to them. And this particular example, the purpose was for a technical team for research and development, and they needed information that could be translated into technical action. So this was hand washing habits in a developing country. The technical team clearly couldn't all visit the country, but what they were able to see was the sheer effort involved in what the women were doing. But they were able to see that water, because of the restrictions, water was being reused, and with each load of laundry, the water was getting successively dirty, but they could also see all the dye transfer coming out of it. So the R&D team were actually able to come away knowing that they had to investigate things like soil redeposition, dye transfer, water hardness, and it came out very clearly from actually seeing what the women did. Now, they could have taken technical measurements, but the team, when they actually saw the colour of the water and how it's being used, it's like a light bulb going on, and you can hear that with your client because, oh, is that really what people do? Is that water really that filthy? So very good communication to the R&D team. Another example is where you can use video in packaging design. Here we specifically used freeze framing to break down the manual process of handling a shampoo or a conditioner bottle in real life situations. If you were to sit around a table with an interviewer, you would be unlikely to be able to genuinely demonstrate how that bottle is used. So freeze framing is an extremely good way of breaking down very detailed actions should that be necessary for that type of project. Third example is public sector. The purpose here was for town planners trying to draw people back into a town centre, pretty shabby town centre, nothing much done to it since the 80s, usual pedestrianisation, everything looking a bit down at heel. And the type of research here, it was a combination of just observation without talking to people from different angles, but also the use of talking heads as well to communicate the messages back to the local authority team. And this is a good combination as well because you can see what people are doing and analyse that, but bring it to life as well by interviewing particular people and using that in a talking heads way. Another example where you can use video can be used extremely effectively for sensitive or emotional subjects, and with young people and with teenagers. You can use it with the sensitive subjects, observe their daily life, but also question and explore their views and why they do certain things. Now, there were obviously a number of people involved in this study, a number of respondents. These pictures are actually of a 15-year-old girl. And in viewing the videos, it was actually quite heartbreaking at times to see how she struggled emotionally with dealing with her diabetes and having to cart round with what she saw as an ugly great monitor, which didn't look in the least bit cool. She said, why can't it look more like a smartphone? Why does it have to look like this? It's so ugly. Also seeing habits where in the middle picture you're seeing she's actually injecting through her clothing, which you're really not supposed to do, but it does happen. And obviously other aspects of her life in terms of her diet and how her mother was coping and how her mother dealt with meal times. So video extremely good in this type of situation. So that's just 4 very specific examples, and let's pull that together into some of the styles or types of projects that a client might want to use video for. So it might be, for example, opinions and views, what people have to say. It might be people actually doing things. This is young men in a hairdressing salon, so they're actually demonstrating what they do with their hair. I have to confess, and people will disagree with me, I am not a great fan of videoing discussion groups. I don't think it's good use of money and time. I understand if a client can't be there, they might want to view it, and absolutely fine. But from a real communication point of view, it's really boring because the purpose of video is to actually hone in on something that is of specific interest, and all you get with a discussion group is a very stationary camera. Other project types, you might have people who are in their own homes doing something. Your hairstyling, and you might be following people around, whether it's shopper research or a day in the life of.
I like doing in my spare time with the family is shopping, eating out, beauty treats, and getting my hair done.
You might be doing the videoing yourself, or a video company might be doing the filming for you. But increasingly popular is to actually give the camera to the respondent to self-record, for example, video diaries. And that is particularly useful, again, in sensitive or emotional topics or with young people, particularly young people, it's great. But what you can get when you give somebody their own video and to do their own video diary, you can really see their body language and you can hear their very accurate tones in their voice and what they're thinking if it's a difficult subject that they are talking about.
8:10, Thursday morning. Feeling a bit groggy. Had a hypo in the night. So I'm just about to take a morning blood test.
So drilling down in this a bit more, what is it you're trying to get from the client in the briefing that helps you put a project plan together? They might be wanting to explore a subject in a different way to elicit insights that are not easy to see using other methods. But also, and this is a little different, you can be using video to illustrate the findings in a way which informs and engages the client where other communication methods might not. The difference here is that in one way, you're using video to analyze. The second way, you're using video to communicate, and we will come back to that because this is very important in terms of how you're briefing the videographer. The first laundry example I showed you, the analysis of that, the video analysis, showed the people reusing water. It showed things like the foam decreasing with each load of laundry going into it. But the way the video was edited, how it was edited together, not only showed that, but it illustrated the colour of the water so that the clients, when they viewed it, said, look at the colour of that water. So that's using video to both analyse and to communicate. So now we're really getting to the nitty-gritty of what you're trying to get out of your client during the briefing and the things that the researcher needs to think about. And we're going to start at the bottom of this chart. So how are you going to use the video material? I think that's fairly obvious. You're going to use that to analyse individual clips to build your story. Okay? However, how's the client going to use the video material? They're unlikely to be doing analysis. They don't necessarily want to see all the video clips. They're wanting to see the whole story. So they're going to be using the video material to see the whole story. And that's subtly different. Who's your audience when you're giving the presentation? Well, it's the person who has taken you on. It might be a market research manager in a company. It might not be the market research manager, but they will have recruited you to do the work on behalf of others in the company. So the next question is, well, who's your client's audience? Because the audience might be the working team who actively work in the project, and that might be technical, it might be research and development audience, it might be a marketing audience, but it might also be a senior stakeholder. So the person who's recruited you and you're giving your presentation to, they might, when they're presence of a senior stakeholder, there may be other things coming into play there. And they might be using it as internal marketing communication to their stakeholder in order to get their project to go along certain lines or to have more budget for their project. Now, that's getting into internal agendas and politics, and clearly the researcher has absolutely no control and really doesn't want to get involved in that. But it's incredibly important to know that's going on because that can influence the type of edit that you should put together and therefore how you brief the videographer. Now it's things that we really don't want to know about, but it does actually impact sometimes on the relationship between the researcher and the client after the project has finished. Okay. So in other words, what type of meeting will you be in when you present your findings? It might be something really straightforward. It might be a very early stage working meeting. You're all sitting around a table. You're giving a spoken presentation. So that might be a straightforward one. It might, however, be part of a wider meeting incorporating other information, other people working in different aspects of the project also giving their findings as well. It might be a meeting where all the key stakeholders are involved, so starting to get bigger, might be more senior people involved there. It might also be something akin to a report at the very end of a project. It's a visual record of the whole story, and it's being used for internal training of new people coming in, or for archiving there for the future. So it could be a very different type of meeting that you're involved in when you're giving your presentation of the video and the research findings. So I'm actually going to come back to this later, and I'm going to just summarize this little bit where it's the interaction between the researcher and the client. So the things that you're needing to think about which affect the fieldwork planning is, why does the client want to use video? Why does the researcher want to use video? Because it might actually differ. And how are the results actually going to be used? And you also need to think about the things which affect the communication. And that might be, who is the real end client, who will be at the final presentation, and is there more than one end client? Who is it that you're actually talking to? So that brings me to the end of the first part of the talk, which is about the client-research interaction. And I will then come back at the end and get into more of the nitty-gritty between the researcher and the videographer.